Hi there, and welcome back to the Navigating Your Mental Health Compass video series. With this being the 7th video in the series, most of you probably know my intro by now. But just in case you're joining for the first time, my name is Sarah, and I'm a registered clinical counselor living and working in Vancouver, BC, on the traditional, unceded, and ancestral territory of the Coast Salish peoples, the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. This video series, Navigating Your Mental Health Compass, is an 8-part video series that provides evidence-based education and strategies from acceptance and commitment therapy, also known as ACT, to help you build greater self-awareness, learn effective strategies to better your mental health, and move beyond obstacles to live a life with meaning and purpose. As I mentioned, this is episode 7. I always encourage you to go back and watch previous episodes if you haven't already done so. This episode in particular really builds on episode 6, titled Knowing What's Important to You, where I cover the ACT concept of values. In this episode, titled Taking Action, I will go over the 6th and final ACT core concept called committed action. The ACT core concept of committed action is known as the behavioral component of this therapy. Most of the ACT concepts that we've covered so far have made up the psychological or cognitive component of the therapy, including present moment awareness from episode 2, acceptance, episode 3, diffusion, episode 4, and the observing self, episode 5. Committed action refers to taking effective action guided by our values despite the presence of difficult thoughts and emotions. The concept of committed action is tightly connected with the concept of values. Values are the principles that guide committed action, which is why it's so important to know what your values are before engaging with the concept of committed action. In the compass metaphor that we've been using in this video series to illustrate the 6 core psychological processes in ACT, North represents both values and committed action. The idea is to live a life guided by our personal values and to engage in behaviors that reflect these values. The north direction of the compass is likened to the North Star, a reference point to follow to help guide you in the direction you want to go in life. Before we dive deeper into the concept of committed action, let's do a brief recap of how ACT approaches values. Values represents what's most important and meaningful to each of us. In ACT, values are considered intrinsic. They are personally chosen, and unlike goals, which can be achieved or failed, values are ongoing and can be pursued regardless of external circumstances. If you'll recall from episode 6, I reviewed an activity to help you identify your values in 4 different domains in life: relationships, work and education, personal growth and health, and leisure. As a starting point, I encourage you to identify 1 value per domain. In order to help you identify your values, I ask you to think about times in your life in these areas when you felt most alive, fulfilled, or proud of yourself, reflecting on what made those experiences meaningful and how they aligned with your priorities. Now would be a great time to hit the pause button on this video and remind yourself of the values you identified. You're going to need at least 1 personal value to work with to get the most out of this episode. So please take some time now to identify that value that you want to work with. Okay, I'm hoping that you have one of your values that you can work with as we engage with the concept of committed action in this video. The ACT concept of committed action is important for a number of reasons. First of which is alignment with values. As you're well aware of by now, committed action helps us take concrete steps towards what we truly care about, which helps us lead more meaningful and fulfilling lives. Second, behavioral change. While the ACT core concept of present moment awareness, acceptance, diffusion, and the observing self are focused on shifting internal relationships with our thoughts and emotions, committed action emphasizes the importance of behavior change, promoting active engagement in life despite psychological challenges. Thirdly, psychological flexibility. You've heard me say it many times before. The main goal in ACT is psychological flexibility, which is the ability to act effectively in the presence of difficult thoughts and emotions. Committed action fosters this flexibility by encouraging us to pursue value-guided actions even when it's uncomfortable or challenging, thus enhancing our ability to adapt to various situations. Fourth, counteracting avoidance. From an ACT perspective, many of the challenges we encounter stem from our tendency to avoid unpleasant thoughts, emotions, or situations. And even though it makes sense that we want to avoid discomfort, the reality is that life is filled with discomfort. And if we are constantly working to avoid discomfort, we usually end up creating more problems for ourselves long term. Committed action counteracts avoidance by encouraging us to act in alignment with our values despite discomfort, so that values-based actions can form the basis of our lives rather than avoidance-based actions. Fifth, empowerment and agency. Taking committed action gives a sense of empowerment, a sense of control and agency over our lives. By achieving actions in alignment with our values, we can build confidence and resilience in ourselves, which can help improve our mental health. 6, sustainable change. We're probably all familiar with the experience of excitedly implementing a new change in our lives and then eventually falling off the wagon as life gets busy. This is the reality for many of us, myself included. However, maintaining change over time is more likely when the behaviors are value-driven. Committed action encourages ongoing, purposeful activity rather than temporary or superficial changes, which leads to longer-term improvements in life satisfaction and mental health. Let's go through an example together of engaging in values-based committed action. I'm going to reference one of my own personal values that I identified in episode 6. You may recall that I shared one of my values in the work education domain is social justice. I firmly believe it is necessary to acknowledge, address, and work to dismantle the systems of oppression and discrimination that disproportionately affect marginalized individuals. This is the definition of social justice I'm using. In episode 6, I discussed how I was able to identify this value. In this episode, I'm going to share more about how I was able to identify an action step in alignment with this value within that work and education domain. When my partner initially presented the idea of me applying to TELUS STORYHIVE for the Voices grant to produce this video series, I was like, no way. I had never done anything like this before, and to be honest, I wasn't thrilled about being on camera. Furthermore, I had major imposter syndrome. I was also pregnant at the time with my second child and knew it would be challenging to find the time and energy to complete this project while on parental leave. However, although the initial idea of putting together this video series seemed impossible, something started to seep in as I thought more about it. What came up for me was my value of social justice. I reflected on how creating a video series such as this may allow for those who cannot access mental health services a way to engage in some education and reflection that may be helpful to them in their mental health. So despite my desire to avoid the discomfort associated with doing something way outside of my comfort zone, I leaned into this opportunity because it was important and meaningful to me. Creating the Navigating Your Mental Health Compass video series was a way for me to action my value of social justice in the work and education domain. As you can see in this example, connecting to our values isn't always easy or comfortable. In fact, connecting to our values often involves discomfort. Remember, from an ACT perspective, life isn't about avoiding discomfort. It's about living a meaningful and purposeful life, and one of the ways to do that is to engage in value-driven actions. Now, this is obviously a big and bold series of action steps in my alignment with social justice. Throughout my career, there are many smaller ways I've taken committed action in alignment with this value, such as attending educational workshops, reading books, offering sliding scale services to individuals with lower financial means, attending protests and marches for the rights of marginalized individuals, and more. Committed action isn't necessarily about big, bold action steps, although it can be. It's about identifying, committing, and following through with any action steps, no matter how small they are, that are in alignment with our values. Now that I've gone through my own example, I'd like to invite you to give this a go for yourself. Pick one of your values for now, and then you can apply the same set of principles to your remaining values in your own time. Step 1 is to identify your value. Refer to episode 6, Knowing What's Important to You, to help you with this step. For me, I chose my value of social justice. Step 2, Set a specific, measurable, achievable, and time-sensitive goal related to this value. The parameters of the StoryHive application made this very concrete for me, as there was an application to complete and a specified deadline. Step 3, develop an action plan. Break down the goal. Identify smaller, more manageable steps you can take to reach your goal. In my example, this involved reviewing the application requirements, speaking with my partner about an action plan, and blocking off time to complete the action plan. It's also important to consider potential obstacles and plan how to address them. I had to consider the fact that I was pregnant and would have a baby by the time the deliverables were due. As such, I planned to complete a certain portion of episode content writing and filming ahead of the deadline. I also told my point person at StoryHive that I was pregnant so that I could receive some additional support and consideration if needed. Step 4, reflect and adjust. ACT is all about flexibility. This means that sometimes, although you may have had one plan, life happens and we often need to adjust and make changes. In addition, it's important to reflect on how the values alignment feels and the process, not just the outcome. In my series of action steps, I learned that it was more time effective to film 2 episodes at a time, so that meant adjusting my original plan. I also got the hang of writing the episode content over time and developed a formula of sorts, which led me to being more efficient as time went on. Okay, so let's review the 4 steps. Step 1, identify your value. Step 2, set a specific goal in alignment with your value. Step 3, develop an action plan. Step 4, reflect and adjust. Now that I've given you a template to help you plan out your committed action steps, I'd like you to take some time now to get started on this. You probably didn't get a chance to get all the way through the steps, so please be sure to go back to this exercise after you finish watching this episode. If this is feeling challenging right now, please don't give up. This is a new strategy and skill that will take practice over time. Remember, you're just getting started, so be compassionate and patient with yourself. I hope you're feeling excited about pursuing your values-based committed action steps. Remember, the idea is to continually engage in behaviors through committed action in alignment with our values on an ongoing basis. Small behaviors and actions are just as important as bigger goals. Before we wrap up this episode on committed action, I just want to briefly go over when engaging in committed action may not be helpful. ACT is all about flexibility, so one specific strategy is never going to be 100% effective, and that includes the strategy of committed action. Practicing committed action can sometimes be unhelpful or counterproductive in these following scenarios. 1, lack of values clarity. If we don't have clearly identified core values, then committed actions may not align with what's truly important to us, and this misalignment can lead to frustration and a sense of aimlessness. 2, unrealistic or overly ambitious goals. Action steps that are too ambitious or unrealistic can lead to feelings of failure and discouragement. It's important to set SMART goals. 3, ignoring self-care and well-being. Committed action should not come at the expense of one's well-being. Ignoring self-care in the pursuit of goals can lead to burnout and decreased mental health. 4, rigid adherence to goals. Being overly rigid in adhering to specific goals without flexibility can be detrimental. Life circumstances change, and the ability to adapt is crucial for maintaining psychological flexibility. 5, lack of support or resources. Taking committed actions without adequate support or resources can be overwhelming and counterproductive. Support from others and access to necessary resources are crucial for success. 6, avoiding underlying issues. Using committed action as a way to avoid addressing deeper underlying psychological issues can be counterproductive. It is important to address the root causes of distress while also taking meaningful action. So while committed action is a vital component of ACT, it is essential that it be practiced in a balanced, flexible, and value-driven manner. In the ACT compass metaphor, each direction and part of the compass represents the 6 ACT core processes. North represents committed action as well as values. This concept focuses on taking concrete steps towards goals that are aligned with one's values, even in the presence of difficult thoughts and feelings. So, that wraps up this 7th episode of the Navigating Your Mental Health Compass video series. Once again, I'm Sarah, and thank you so much for joining me. Just a reminder that all the videos from this series are on YouTube, so be sure to take a look so you can watch and re-watch your favorite episodes. The 8th and final episode of Navigating Your Mental Health Compass will be on YouTube. In the final episode titled Following Your Mental Health Compass, I will pull together all 6 core acceptance and commitment therapy processes that we have covered so far to help you understand how you can navigate between them and support your mental health.